All right, welcome back again to Bankruptcy with Ben. And what I want to do in this video is take a little bit of a detour. I started the channel because I want to track bankruptcy topics that are in the news, something that people can relate to, actual real life events that are happening. There's a lot of lawyer videos out there where you see a lawyer droning on about some kind of dry area of the law. Look, I'm a lawyer and I find it boring as hell. So I can only imagine what other people view it as. So what I want to do with this channel is actually show you topics that are in the news and kind of show you how does the news spin it, what is actually going on, and hopefully it's something that people can actually relate to if someone is somehow tied into a bankruptcy process. If either you own a business and you think the business is facing some kind of financial distress and you want to know more about what it would mean to restructure, or if you're a creditor, someone owes you money and then they're in bankruptcy, or you're swept up under the bankruptcy litigation if you receive papers from a bankruptcy trustee. Bankruptcy has far reaching tentacles. And so it's kind of a twofold goal of my videos is to keep it entertaining, keep it interesting, and also inform you of or really educate you. With this video, I'm going to do something which is more towards the boring lawyer videos, but it's not really, and I'll explain what I mean. And there's something that really just caught my attention in the news, and it's an article from Fox Business about why so many restaurant chains are filing for bankruptcy. And I want to just kind of break it down with you and explain to you a key point that is actually an incredible tool for many small business owners and even large business owners in bankruptcy. And that is the ability to get out of a lease that is cumbersome. But let's get to the article first. So let's see here. Okay, so why are so many restaurant chains filing for bankruptcy this year? You can see I've already marked up a couple of the points that I wanted to go over. What's just for the sake of making it clean, because I have too many doodles on here, and that was what I did throughout law school. Is I like to doodle, and that's how I got through law school. Um, okay. Why are so many restaurant chains filing for bankruptcy this year? So the article begins that the year has not even reached its fourth quarter, and bankruptcies among restaurant chains, operating companies, and large franchisees are already nearly double what they were in 2023. Why is that? So let's go to the restaurants. And what do they say are some of these causes of the spike in bankruptcy? You have a challenging economic environment, post-pandemic recovery issues, rising labor costs, changing consumer habits, and inflation. If you take a step back for a second, it seems to me that post-pandemic recovery issues, rising labor costs, changing consumer habits, and inflation all fall under the umbrella of challenging economic environment. So challenging economic environment is the broad category, but what does that mean specifically? What are the challenges? So one is recovery issues still related to the pandemic. What are those issues? It's not clear. The article doesn't discuss. But one thing that I've seen in my business are businesses that were forced to take out loans to stay afloat during the lockdowns. And let's just say, for example, a business took out a $1 million loan. And let's just say they were it could be a very good repayment term, and it could be $10,000 a month is the amount that they have to repay on the loan. Okay. However, prior to the pandemic, they were not necessarily taking out a loan with $10,000 a month repayment terms. Maybe they would have had $3,000, $2,500. But now, $10,000, even if the business is turning the same profit as it was pre-COVID, you have an extra $7,000 a month in costs that, if everything else being equal, was not there pre-COVID. So that's one example where I think article is referencing with post-pandemic recovery issues. Another issue is rising labor costs. And obviously for a restaurant, that's going to be key. What does a restaurant have to pay its workers? What does it have to pay for the price of food, for the price of, the price of equipment, and all those things now cost more because the laborers who are involved in making that finished product, their costs have gone up. Why have their costs gone up though? Perhaps because of inflation. I think inflation is directly related to the post-pandemic recovery issue. I'm not going to get into inflation on this video. That's far beyond the scope of what we're doing. I'm not an economist. I'm just here to kind of explain to you the realities on the ground of what businesses are facing. And the last is the change in consumer habits. But of course, that's directly related to these other economic factors, right? The consumer, if they paid before, let's just say a burger was $10, I keep kosher. Kosher food is even more expensive. A burger runs you closer to $20, $25 even at some of the nicer restaurants in Manhattan. But let's just say a burger pre-COVID was $20. I love a nice, good burger. To me, I'd rather that even over a nice, juicy steak. Nothing like a good burger. But now a burger is $25. And you have a family of 6 paying an extra $5 per burger. It's a lot of money. Another $30 now that I have to budget it. So changing consumer habits can simply mean that the consumers don't want to spend as much. Why are they not spending as much? In large part because the consumers' wages have not increased. So the consumers' wages are the same or not rising in proportion to the rise of costs. Well, then the consumers will not be spending as much. And that's going to mean now a decrease in revenue and a decrease in profit for the restaurant. And that's a key cause leading so many businesses and restaurants into bankruptcy. But it's not all doom and gloom. And that's, I think, what this article is highlighting. As it's noted that just because a company files for Chapter 11 does not mean it is going out of business, does not mean it is going out of business or going away. It just means that there's a challenge facing the business that the stakeholders believe can be addressed by that form of bankruptcy. Now, what does that mean? So let's just say, for example, to keep it really, really simple, a business now has this pre-COVID loan a COVID era loan from the shutdowns of $10,000 a month. If the business does not have the means to pay off $10,000 a month until the loan is paid in full for the remainder of the term of the loan, well, what bankruptcy can do is bankruptcy can actually help to shed some of that debt and sometimes even all of that debt, and the business can actually go into Chapter 11. They can still operate their business in Chapter 11, and that is a key point. Chapter 11 does not mean you have to shut your doors. In Chapter 11, you are still permitted to operate the business. So now, what they do is they propose a reorganization plan, and in the plan, they're paying back in proportion to the actual assets and value and revenue of the business. So if the business does not have the means to pay it, you can't squeeze blood out of the stone, so to speak. So the idea is if the business can no longer pay $10,000 a month, they can actually rework that loan in bankruptcy and cut it down to, let's say, $3,000 a month. Now, again, very important. Just because the business slashes debt does not mean that the business still has a profitable model. And that's something I always counsel my clients is that you still have to make sure that you have a model that can turn a profit. Because if your model is not turning a profit, even if you slash your debt to zero, you still have to bring something in. So it's something to keep in mind. But there are many businesses that do have a profitable model, but ran into some severe hardships because of COVID. And they want to make a deal where they can get out. And frankly, the creditors often benefit too. And I know this as a creditor's rights attorney myself, because it's better for a creditor to have something coming in than nothing. Whereas if the business filed a Chapter 7, if Chapter 7 is a liquidation, in a liquidation, the business would be closing its doors. Any assets that the business has will be sold off, usually for far less than the actual value out would be outside of bankruptcy court, and creditors would be getting pennies on the dollar. So I counsel my clients or creditors all the time, well, yes, it is good to hold their feet to the fire to a certain extent to keep the business honest and to keep them, to make sure they actually pay something, but don't go too crazy where you're going to cut your nose to spite your face. Because if the business fails and goes into Chapter 7, then nobody wins. Everyone loses. So I really firmly believe that bankruptcy should be a process where all stakeholders can just kind of come around the negotiating table and everyone can work out a deal that is obviously not what everyone had hoped it would be when they first entered into their business arrangements, but it's a deal that will still help them come out and really becomes, I think, a win-win for everyone, given the given what's at stake. Now, there's one more point before we wrap up, and this article addresses specifically Red Lobster. And what did Red Lobster do? Is they are getting out of long-term leases with their landlords. And that is one of the key points in bankruptcy, is that a debtor, meaning the company that's in bankruptcy, has the ability to do what's called a rejection of a lease. And what that means is, let's just say a business is operating out of a large storefront on a very busy thoroughfare. And because it's a prime location and it's a good sized space, the rent is, let's say, $50,000 a month. That comes out to $600,000 a year. That can be a lot of money for a business. The business can say, we want to still be able to operate, but we have another location which we think would actually be better suited for us. And it's only $30,000 a month. So now we can save $20,000 a month in rent. But the landlord is going to say, well, 1 second, you have another 5 years left on your lease. You can't just leave me hanging high and dry. That comes out to over $3 million in rent that I'm going to be losing if you leave now. So there is a benefit that's given to the landlord. Bankruptcy is not a get out of jail free card. It is a balancing act between the creditors and trying to protect the creditors' rights and giving the debtors some kind of leeway to be able to stay in business. And the catch is that while the debtor has a right to do what's called rejecting the lease, which is they file a notice with the bankruptcy court saying, we are rejecting this lease. We no longer want it. We are now relieved of all of our future obligations in this lease. We're terminating the lease and we're done. Give the keys to the landlord. Goodbye. In turn, the landlord is able to make a claim in the bankruptcy for any damages the landlord suffers as a result of this lease being rejected. It essentially works the same way as a breach of contract. So the debtor is breaching their contract with the landlord by leaving the storefront with another 5 years left on the lease. So the landlord files a claim in the bankruptcy court, and they say, just to keep it simple, well, we're owed now $3 million because of the remaining 5 years on the lease. The actual calculations and the actual computations about how to calculate the damages, as with most things in law, especially the bankruptcy law, it's actually more complex than that. I'm just kind of giving you the simplified overview to understand at kind of the base level what's going on. So the landlord files a claim in the bankruptcy for, let's just say, $3 million. Now, that does not necessarily mean the landlord is going to get $3 million. The landlord gets in line essentially with all the other creditors, and they get a distribution based off the available assets that the debtor can have for distribution, or the available money the debtor has to be able to pay. Or the last kind of bucket of how this is calculated is you do what's called a liquidation value of the assets. So if a restaurant, let's just say, owns $1 million worth of equipment, that doesn't mean that they're going to get $1 million if they sold the equipment, right? Because sales in and of themselves have costs. You have to hire a broker, you have to publish notices, things usually go for cheaper than the actual appraised value. So let's just say after cutting all those costs, the restaurant would sell all its equipment for $500,000. So that means the restaurant would have to pay at least $500,000 to its creditors, combined with the revenue it has available to make payments. And the available revenue is obviously going to be on a net basis after deducting all the costs. So to recap, the ability to reject a lease and to shed debt are two very, very critical tools and powerful tools that a debtor has in bankruptcy. Let's stop the sharing. And that's, I think, what the point of the article was to just kind of explain that financial challenges are not the end of the world. And it's not the end of the world for a creditor of the business, and it's not the end of the world for the business itself. Both parties still have options together to come reach a deal in bankruptcy court, something that will help both sides come out of it, and hopefully will also be better for consumers and for the economy in general. All right, that is basically all we have for now. I hope everyone enjoyed. If you got value out of this, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, we will see you all later.